constitutional amendments, Samoan political drama, independence talks, and more. Today is Thursday, March 27th, and welcome back to Pacific Airwaves, a podcast on the Pacific Islands from the Southeast Asia Program, the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, and the Australia Chair at CSIS. I'm Monica Sato, in the studio today with John Auger from the Australia Chair. Hi, John. Happy spring.
Hey, Monica. Happy spring. Any big plans to see the cherry blossoms in DC?
I actually do. So this weekend, me and a couple of friends are going to watch the cherry blossoms in a park near Georgetown. I'm half Japanese, and it's called Hanami. And we do it, at least when I was growing up, we did it almost every year when I visited my family in Japan. How about you? Have you seen the cherry blossoms? I think this is your second spring here in DC, right?
Yes, this is my second spring. And luckily for me, I get to see some cherry blossom trees every day on my walk to work. So it's a good way to start my day out.
I'm very jealous. I feel like I only see, are those magnolias, the pink ones that kind of look like cherry blossoms? I can never tell.
I'm not sure, Monica.
Okay, well, anyway, let's dive into the news making waves in the Pacific. And I hope everyone is having a lovely spring.
There were a number of new constitutional amendments across the Pacific Islands this month. First, PNG has implemented two changes to its constitution, one limiting access to votes of no confidence and the other declaring PNG as a Christian nation.
Two constitutional amendments so close together is a big deal. The amendment on votes of no confidence was overwhelmingly passed by Parliament on March 12, with 80 votes in favor and only 4 against. It introduces an 18-month grace period after any unsuccessful vote of no confidence against a prime minister.
That's right. Last year, sagas over votes of no confidence occupied the agenda in the PNG Parliament, limiting productivity and the legislative process.
The other amendment, which was passed the same day, formally recognizes PNG as a Christian nation. Christianity has long been the country's majority religion, but now Christianity will be formally reflected in the 5th goal of the Constitution, and the Bible will be recognized as a national symbol.
Moving on to Nauru. Nauru's parliament has approved a significant constitutional amendment, increasing the number of cabinet ministers the president can appoint from 6 to 7. The amendment passed in a secret ballot with 15 votes in favor and 2 against. As a result, the maximum number of ministers, including the president, is now 8. Despite this adjustment, cabinet positions will still represent 37% of the total membership of parliament, thereby maintaining the existing balance of power.
Meanwhile, in Fiji, Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka's attempt to amend the country's constitution was defeated in Parliament. The bill sought to remove the requirement of 3/4 of MPs and 3/4 of registered voters to pass any constitutional amendments.
Rabuka pushed hard for this change, arguing that the constitution didn't reflect the will of the people because it was imposed by the former Fiji First administration.
While Rabuka has been pretty disappointed that this bill didn't go through, he said that they would not give up on their goal and would regroup and reassess their next steps.
Moving over to Samoa, last month we reported that Prime Minister Fiame Naomi Mataafa had survived a vote of no confidence tabled against her on February 24th. The following week, on March 6th, she defeated yet another vote of no confidence by 32 votes against and 19 in favor.
This second motion was instigated by the chairman of the FAST Party, La'aluli Polataivo Schmidt. The FAST Party is Prime Minister Mataafa's own party, and Schmidt was formerly Samoa's Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries.
In the previous week, Schmidt had actually voted alongside Mataafa in the vote of no confidence. But this week, his vote flipped, and the opposition party voted alongside Mataafa instead. Regardless, she remains in her position.
And the political infighting doesn't stop there. During the vote of no confidence session in Parliament, Mataafa was verbally attacked by a former associate minister and FAST Party member of Parliament. In the sexist attack, Uyono Tanina Christian remarked that Mataafa would be a better leader if she was married and had a spouse to advise her.
That's a pretty brutal personal attack, though she didn't respond to the taunts coming from her own party members.
Moving on to some updates on aid stories covered by our last episode. Some countries in the region have stepped up economic development initiatives. For example, the Federated States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and PNG signed the East New Britain Initiative to maximize economic benefits from their substantial tuna resources.
The commercial tuna industry is a major aspect of these economies. They primarily make revenue from their tuna by selling access rights to their waters. The goal of the initiative is to bring those value-added segments of the supply chain to Pacific Island economies by developing processing infrastructure and responsible governance structures.
Additionally, Pacific Island nations received a major grant of $156 million from the Green Climate Fund, aimed at building capacity to manage their tuna stocks. This grant will be critical for maintaining sustainable and ethical fishing in the face of climate change, which threatens this key resource of revenue and sustenance in the region.
Australia has also committed $72 million in budget support to Fiji to boost public financial management, drive economic reforms, and build climate and social resilience.
This additional support is critical in demonstrating that commitment from traditional Pacific aid partners like Australia will continue in the face of geopolitical shifts. Australia has spent roughly $426 million in Fiji on development projects between 2018 and 2022. The next largest bilateral donors during that period were Japan, contributing $283 million, and New Zealand with $152 million.
On the U.S. aid front, New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters made a trip to Washington where he met his counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. After several meetings with senior U.S. officials, Peters stated he was more confident about the prospects of U.S. aid in the Pacific being left alone.
Aid is a significant issue for New Zealand, as 60% of the official development assistance funding goes to its Pacific neighbors. And as many Pacific watchers noted when the U.S. aid pauses were announced, the U.S. ceasing aid operations would yield considerable geopolitical and economic influence to China. But we will have to wait until mid-April when the pause can be lifted to see the aid status.
In other news, consultations between PNG and Bougainville, an autonomous region of PNG, began this week on Bougainville's path to independence. The Bougainville Independence Leaders Consultation Forum signed a resolution recommending September 1, 2027 as the date for Bougainville's independence, which Bougainville's president Ismail Touarama endorsed.
While the resolution is non-binding, it indicates the desired timeline that Bougainville's leaders seek in the lead-up to the consultation, which will be moderated by former New Zealand Governor-General Sir Jerry Mateparae.
In a 2019 referendum, 97.7% of Bougainville's residents voted for independence. PNG's parliament must ratify the referendum for it to come into effect, which has not yet occurred. PNG Prime Minister James Marape has questioned the readiness of Bougainville to run itself, given the small size of the local economy.
More discussions on independence have occurred elsewhere in the region. Activists in the Chuuk Islands, which are part of the Federated States of Micronesia, are renewing their push for independence from the country.
The state has called for independence previously. A referendum on Chuukese independence was initially scheduled for 2015, but has been postponed several times. It was then scheduled to be held in 2022, but once again it was postponed.
Local dissatisfaction with the economy has been the primary reason voiced for independence. Given that Chuuk accounts for nearly half of SFM's population, its secession would have major economic effects and splinter FSM as a whole.
Being a part of FSM's Compact of Free Association agreement with the U.S., the island receives the economic and security benefits of U.S. assistance. If Chuuk were to secede from FSM, then it would lose this access.
Although the island is still divided on the issue, new geopolitical trends, such as uncertainty under the Trump administration, are pushing some Chuuk to more seriously rethink their situation.
Another referendum on self-determination is being planned in Tokelau, a non-self-governing territory of New Zealand. A committee is being created to inform and educate the populace on the process and consequences of such a decision ahead of a potential third referendum.
Tokelau has held two previous referendums on independence in 2006 and 2007. Both narrowly rejected independence, falling just below the two-thirds majority required.
Tokelau faces many of the same challenges as other Pacific islands, such as sea level rise, lack of significant infrastructure, and a growing population. Under the current political structure with New Zealand, Tokelau can't access development funding from institutions like the World Bank because of its status as a territory.
New Zealand has said that self-determination is for the Tokelau people to decide, and they may get the chance to do so in the next few years.
Heading to the North Pacific, a resolution was introduced in Guam's legislature calling for a full examination of statehood or enhanced autonomous status for the U.S. territory.
Senator William A. Parkinson brought forth the legislation, making stark comments about the stakes facing the island, which is critical for U.S. defense in the Indo-Pacific. He expressed his concern that if Guam is left as a territory, it would fall under the influence of China. Around the same time as this resolution was introduced, the governors of the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam joked about the possibility of becoming the 51st state.
While in Washington for an interagency group on insular areas meeting, the territory's leaders talked briefly about the long-time proposal of becoming part of the U.S. While this will not come into fruition soon, it shows how much the Trump administration's interest in annexing territory have prompted some of these discussions to surface.
And finally, let's shift to some regional news. The Marshall Islands signed the Treaty of Rarotonga, becoming the 14th member to join the nuclear weapons-free zone in the South Pacific. The 1986 treaty bans the testing or stationing of nuclear explosive devices in the region.
The treaty won't come into force for the Marshall Islands until it is ratified. Under the COFA agreement with the United States, the Marshall Islands provides bases and access to the U.S. military. While nuclear-powered vessels are allowed under the treaty, the U.S. military can no longer station, deploy, or dock nuclear-armed assets if the treaty is ratified.
Given the history of nuclear testing in the Pacific, it will be interesting to see how the timeline to ratification develops.
In New Zealand, the Green Party launched a petition to extend visa-free travel privileges to Pacific Island countries. Given the close relationships between New Zealand and the Pacific, some see the visa process as an unfair obstacle facing Pacific Islanders.
Conversely, some say the risk of Pacific Islanders overstaying their visas could be higher compared to other regions, with less incentive to return for economic or employment reasons.
New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said that while the petition is under consideration, it is not a priority at the moment. Interestingly, China has concluded visa-free travel agreements with Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, and the Solomon Islands.
And this relates to another news story on visas circulating the news. The New York Times reported that the Trump administration is considering a list of 43 countries targeted for a potential travel ban. Vanuatu, the only Pacific Island country featured on the list, was placed in the yellow category. This is the lowest category of the three and would mean that Vanuatu would have 60 days to address concerns before a ban went into effect.
The range of reasons cited for countries in the yellow category were the risks of failing to share with the U.S. information about incoming travelers, purportedly inadequate security practices for issuing passports, or the selling of citizenship to people from banned countries, which could serve as a loophole around the restrictions.
For context, Vanuatu has a citizenship by investment program, which allows an individual applicant to gain citizenship by investing $130,000 in the country.
While Vanuatu defended its program, it has recently paused applications for the Citizenship Investment Program, likely in response to U.S. pressure stemming from the travel ban list.
Turning to Kiribati, the country is exploring a deep-sea mining deal with China. This comes after the metals company terminated an agreement with a Kiribati state-owned company in January. The agreement provided exploration rights to a large area of Kiribati's seabed, and the company claimed that the mining rights were less commercially viable than its other projects.
Kiribati's Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources held talks with China's ambassador on a sustainable plan for resource exploration. Kiribati has been one of the countries keenly interested in deep-sea resource exploration in the Pacific.
The issue of deep-sea mining is controversial in the region and is a major point of interest from outside powers. Many of these minerals are critical for batteries, electric vehicles, and other industries. And this will continue to be a major regional and global issue in the coming years.
And that's all we have for today.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of Pacific Airwaves. Let us know what you think of our coverage by writing to our main email at searadio@csis.org.
If you're not following us already, please subscribe or give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform.
Our producer is Marla Hiller. Special thanks to our interns Ryan Bean and Gemma King for their assistance with this episode. I'm Monica Sato.
And I'm John Auger.
We'll see you next month for another episode of Pacific Airwaves.